good afternoon, good evening, and good night. You're here with Windy City Meeples and the podcast of Kyle and Shane, bringing you all your gaming news and up-to-date information on what's going on in the world of board games. So Shane, funny, we're the Windy City Meeples, and I think for the first time in a few weeks, we're without wind.
Yeah, that is for sure. It has been. I think I saw someone post that it hit like some hurricane category level winds in the last couple of weeks here. A lot of damage, I'm sure, around town, but
Yeah, speaking of
uh,
damage, my gate's hanging off by the side.
ooh, that's not good. Never good. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of damage, I heard you got some stuff you're working on in your place, eh?
Yeah, very fortunate. Basically, right above where I'm sitting right now, I guess a little bit behind me is the bathtub upstairs. It's cracked and decided to leak through the floor into my games room. Luckily, it avoided my shelf of games and anything important, so it's just kind of the rug got wet. But yeah, that's not exactly a happy thing, but whatever. That's why we have insurance and stuff.
That's right.
So
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear none of your collection got ruined. Be a little depressing, especially here on a games podcast, but hopefully that goes smoothly with getting everything fixed and updated.
oh, I hope so too. That's a job for tomorrow morning.
Future Shane's problem, right?
That's future Shane's problem. You're right. So, what's kind of got you excited right now for like Kickstarter or coming to Kickstarter or been kickstarted? Anything on the horizon there?
Yeah, so there's a game by the title Arena the Contest. It's a tactical combat game for 1 to 8 players. There's two prominent modes in the game. So you have your player versus player, kind of like arena scrimmage type brawl out. And then you also have a cooperative mode where it's a kind of like a one-shot campaign adventure where you kind of like there's a little bit of leveling and stuff, but the cool thing about this one is you're not just going right from like level to level if you're doing the campaign. There's actually like a few puzzles in there, riddles, that kind of thing that actually change from each stage to the next. So I like that there's kind of that extra level of, I guess, thinking in there in between scenarios. And just the fact that the game has both modes, and just to go a little bit more into the what it is, right? Like it's basically like a fantasy adventure, right? So you might have like your mage, your healer, your tank, like those kind of different roles, and every character, if you get all the packages, the Imperial box, the base game, I think there's over like 30 characters, right? So you can kind of build different teams and kind of decide one night you just want to versus, get together, get fighting and attacking right away, or you can do kind of that cooperative thing, right? So I know last time we talked, I kind of said that I favor towards the cooperative, but it's nice to see that this game can do both. And the reason why it's on, I guess, my agenda right now is this game already exists and it's out, but it was something that was huge on Kickstarter in 2018, and they're just getting ready to kind of, I guess, release the second wave of it with their new game, which is Tenaris Adventures, which is basically a huge campaign that puts over 100 hours onto the gameplay. That Kickstarter is still very far away, but the first half with the contest and the base game, that should be arriving, I think it's March, April-ish, so it's just a few more months away, and just
Okay.
really looking forward to kind of getting that one to the table because I've seen a lot of really good reviews and information about it, and I can't wait to give that one a try myself.
That looks interesting. I think I looked at the wrong game now when I'm thinking about it when we talked about it because I think we had talked about a game before once, but it had like female uh, princesses or something. Like it was like I want to say like Robin Hood and all this stuff, but they're all like female anime characters, and I thought that was the contest, but I think that
That
is
one's
something different.
yeah, that's Twisted Fables. That's another
Twisted
one
Fables, that's it. Sorry.
that's on my list. That one seems like a lot quicker, kind of in and out that you can kind of play with one person. And yeah, it's kind of like that futuristic cyberpunk meets Disney princesses. So that one looks pretty
Okay.
cool as well.
Okay, but yeah, I do remember looking at Arena, because once you said that, I was remembering. Yeah, it was like the battle in the arena, and then yeah, it had a co-op, but it was seemed like a tacked on co-op. But yeah, now
And,
that they're
and see,
doing the other thing,
And it was a tacked on co-op, as far as reading all the information on it, but it was one of the things that people loved so much about the game. The fact that they added those little like puzzle elements, the strategy behind the levels.
Yeah.
So after, it's funny because you see some other games and they tack on the co-op and it kind of gets trashed, where this one, it was a tacked on feature that was completely loved. So that's kind of what led them, to what I've read in the updates, to kind of create this expansion totally based on, that story mode and a more flushed out adventure. I think the first one, there's like 12 scenarios, and I think you play 8 or 9, depending on the kind of the decisions you make. Where
Yeah.
this next one is supposed to be like over 300 hours for everything. So it's just ridiculous amount of content if you have the time to get it to your table.
Yeah. And that does sound awesome. And it's always great when you get those unexpected happy accidents, basically. Like they kind of tack something on as an extra, and then all of a sudden it now is going to drive the game forward, right?
Mhm.
Like maybe I haven't played the game, so I mean maybe there's something about the gameplay where it's like it's good, but it's kind of the same as all these other battlers. But then this
Yeah,
story mode thing just took it off, and people are like, "This is awesome!" Like,
mhm. Yeah, time will tell when we can actually get it to the table.
yeah,
One last comment, I guess, that just one really cool thing. You hear a lot of companies, and they always say, they're looking for feedback and interaction. And sometimes you feel like they're just saying that to say it. And other times it seems like it makes, does it actually make an impact, right?
yeah,
And with this game, when the first version of it came out, the only complaint was the miniatures. They didn't look really good. They're kind of tacky, like poor quality.
yeah.
And something they've done with this 2.0 is they've reworked all the miniatures, and so they look way cooler now. Again, I can't testify because I've never seen the old ones versus the new ones in my hand, but they're also giving backers of the first Kickstarter a free upgrade pack with all the upgraded miniatures, which I
That's
thought
awesome.
was, yeah, it's nice to see companies kind of go that extra mile, right?
Oh, it's definitely good because I mean it builds goodwill with your fan base too. I mean, who wants to be the guy who got the crappy version? Well, everybody else waited a year or 6 months and got the better version, like, and then having to go back and rebuy it to upgrade. Like, it's great that they gave it for free. That shows a good integrity on that company's part. So,
Hmm. But it is
yeah,
another one of those games where you can get the base set for about $100, but there's so many
yeah,
expansion bundles, different characters. One of the things that I think looks really cool is the fact they have like 3D terrain for like the walls. So when
yeah.
you look at the dungeon, it's not just little pieces of cardboard. It's actually your resin type plastic like 3D walls and environment. And I think that adds so much to the look of a game, but it definitely really puts the price tag up and up each new little addition.
Oh, for sure. Anytime you add plastic over cardboard, things start skyrocketing. I've been looking into that, so I've seen that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it
So how
sounds awesome. It sounds awesome. Hopefully, you have it in your hands soon enough. Or do you have Arena actually in your hands right now, the original?
I don't, so I
Okay.
kind of hopped onto the late pledge of the whole kind of thing, and I think that's part of the reason why the cost was so high, because it was getting the base, the expansion. They also have a dragon collection, which comes with like 5 epic dragon miniatures, which is
Oh,
cool because can kind of cross use some of those for Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. But
yeah.
it's definitely was a big cost that past Kyle paid. So it's dealt with now. It's paid for. So it's just a matter
Yeah.
of waiting for it.
Okay.
So
Well,
how
that's
about
awesome.
yourself? What games on your horizon?
Well, I had a couple I was looking at, but one that I've definitely been getting across my Instagram feed lately is this game called Regency by Peak Games. It actually will be at Kickstarter on, I believe, the 16th of February. It'll be hitting Kickstarter. The other game I was looking at has no, it's kind of undetermined, could be next year. So I kind of am like, well, I'll table that one for now and just follow it. But the Regency, it's a Tableau building game for 2 to 6 players. So it's just a bunch of cards for the most part. It's a smaller box, takes less time. I've been kind of looking for some of those games that are filler games or lighter games,
So I
just
kind of
because.
I
Sorry.
was going to pause you for a second. And what exactly is a Tableau game?
sorry, Tableau is kind of where you're building uh, either an engine or city or something in front of you. You have your play area in front of you where you're adding stuff to it.
Okay.
And it just kind of builds up. Like Everdale has the Tableau elements where you're building your city in front of you.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh, so it's just kind of something that's kind of yours that you're building up that no one else. Well, I'm not going to say they don't have access to, but it's not their area.
Okay.
So in this one, you take the role of one of 10 historic leaders, like from the Queen of Sheba to William Wallace, Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan. Like, so they
Okay.
have, there's 10 of them. And then you have two different decks of cards. You have the populist deck, and you have the event deck. So on your leader card, there's going to be 6 slots with different symbols, which represent different castes, is the term they're using. So like noble, military, religion, like, so the symbol represents somebody of that order kind of thing. And so you're trying to attract people from the populist deck onto your leader's board to build up your kingdom. And so like some guys have only one symbol on them, so they're very limited in where they can go into your city. Some have multiple symbols, so you got a choice of where to put them. But once they're there, they're kind of locked in there unless something allows you to move them. But so you're bringing them in, and the way you're doing that is you're using your event cards. You're going to have a hand of event cards, which have multi-use. You can use them as these points on the bottom to try to attract a person, like pay the cost to bring that card from the populace to you, or you can use them as a action or reaction card. So maybe you can play the card that says just gain a common folk from the populace if there's one there, and then you're not paying the cost for them. Or someone does that and you play a reaction that says deny that person's move or whatever, right? And the event decks also, every card has a symbol on it as well. And so kind of the tricky part is you can't play those cards as actions or reactions unless you have someone in your city that has that symbol on it.
Okay.
So it kind of unlocks the power of the cards the more you build your city. There are common cards that you can just use at any time, and each leader has one symbol on it that kind of is their power. So even
Okay.
if you have no one in your city, those cast cards will be unlocked for you. But you have to bring in the other guys to unlock the rest of your abilities. And so the game goes until 6 people. You fill all 6 slots on your fiefdom, they call it. And it seems pretty quick, seems pretty neat, but there's a little to take that because you can steal opponents. Once you get your cards unlocked, you can start stealing opponents' citizens to kind of block them, or like I said, straight up blocking them. If they're going to go for the win with somebody, you can just straight up play a card that blocks them. And so there's little of take that and interaction with it, but I
It
don't know. It
sounds
seemed really nice. So
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds cool, like just the fact that you can kind of see, I guess, the big picture, right? You could be holding on to these cards that you're like, okay, if I just get this one guy, I can do X, Y, and Z, right? So you kind of have
yeah.
that like, that build up of that suspense to kind of get to that like ultimate card or ultimate move. We're still having to worry about the kind of the players next to you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I really like. It looks really good. The art from what I've seen, I like the art that I've seen. We'll see what happens when it comes to Kickstarter. Like I said, it's going to be a smaller box game. It's nothing epic like Arena or like the Gloomhavens or anything like that. No major strategy. It's just it looks like a 20 to 40 minute, just kind of lighter game where you could just teach anyone fairly easily. So you get the almost like a gateway game.
Yeah, those games are so important, especially to have ones where, for myself, having the younger daughter, it's okay, we only have an hour, hour and a half here. We need to make sure we can do a game from start to finish, right? So it's nice to
Yeah.
have those kind of games too, because as looking over my collection recently, I've noticed I have too many long games, and I kind of need to branch out and try to look for some of those more lighter, quicker options.
Yeah, I found in the cleaning off my shelves, I have a lot of small box games that I totally forgot I had. I filled a whole big Tupperware thing of small box games to move them out. So I got to look into them and delve into them a little bit more too, because I think there's some there that I've maybe played once. So,
And I
but
think
they're good
that's
to have.
And the really exciting thing about us taking this podcast adventure is I think, I don't know if I can speak to both of us or not with this one, but I think it's got me more willing and excited to try stuff that normally wouldn't be in my wheelhouse.
Oh, for sure, I agree with that. I mean, I know that I've been a little more like that. That's actually something my wife complains about is I'm always wanting to learn a new game,
Right.
but she's like, "Can't we just play the games we have?" And no, but yeah, I definitely with this has helped me branch out because I'm definitely not a co-op guy, but I'm willing to like try these co-op games out and give them a try and see what they're into. So it is branching us out with this podcast for sure.
hmm I know when we finally get there, I'll be interested on your Near and Far is one that we're kind of part way through for all the listeners there that me and Shane have been playing with our wives to in the co-op, or not a co-op, but a narrative driven adventure game. And there's still a little bit of take that back and forth and you kind of block each other off, but you're basically playing through your own separate story as you go, and there's some choose your adventure type stuff going on. But this the next successor, I guess, from that designer is that same style of game, but more designed to be more co-op. So it'd be interesting to see your take once we've kind of give that one a roll as well.
Yeah, Ryan Lockett is uh, pretty much a virtuoso in this industry I'm seeing. I actually looked up him the other day just to try and find that other game we were talking about, that Now or Never, that I hadn't even heard of until I just saw it on somebody else's list.
Right.
Because I was thinking Sleeping Gods was his big game this year, but supposedly he's putting that out without even going to Kickstarter. But yeah, when I was looking that up, like the guy has just done tons of stuff. He does the art, he does the graphic layout, like he does everything for these games and other people's games. So I mean, the guy's kind of a virtuoso in that. So anything he comes out with, I'm actually pretty excited about. I mean, even saw on the BGG or Board Game Geek store, they do these art prints of games
Okay.
by other artists, and so the newest series has Root, but it's drawn by Ryan Lockett. Like as soon as I saw it, I'm like, that art style's familiar, and then I seen who did it. I'm like, yeah, Ryan Lockett did it. So that guy's that guy is kind of an idol. I mean, I don't think I could ever be a artist, but it's kind of someone who's taken his dream, which I think we both have kind of had a similar dream of like making games or being part of that
Being in this
industry.
space, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and being in this industry, and he's just done it from the ground up. Like he's created his own company, he does it all pretty much in house.
Yeah, be definitely one of those guys that you're like, yeah, I'll buy you a beer if I can, talk to you for 20 minutes here and just.
Yeah. I mean, when I looked it up, the company is 3 people.
Right.
And I think they just added, there's him and his wife, and they just added a second person, I don't know, a few years ago.
Right.
So yeah, no, it's great. So yeah, those two games sound pretty exciting. I mean, I know they're not in. I mean, Arena might be in some people's hands now, but I know Regency, like I said, Regency is not until February it hits Kickstarter, and I can't wait for you to get Arena in your hands so we can give it a good go. And
Yeah, you never quite know with Kickstarters now, and the big thing right now, a lot of the games I have that are supposed to come this year, the big thing is the Chinese New Year that's coming up in February, and something that I wasn't aware of before is apparently factories shut down for like 3 full weeks for Chinese New Year. Like it is a big deal.
oh yeah, I mean, I don't know when you started kickstarting. I don't think we were ever talked about that. I know I've been doing them for about 4 years now, I think. And yeah, every time it comes to January when a game's supposed to be like hitting North America for like a March release, every time in January I'm getting all these updates that are like, well, we're hoping to get this out before the Chinese New Year. Like,
Right.
we're hoping it's on a ship because China shuts down for a month.
Yeah, I think I got 3 games that are like that, where they're like, yeah, we're just about finished here, and we're gonna try to get in before that deadline. But
Yeah. Must be nice to just shut down for a month, eh?
yeah, yeah. Again, I know nothing about the China
Me neither.
politics and how it works, but yeah, 3 weeks for New Year's, like we get a day, you know,
Yeah.
here in Canada. So
Yeah. We get a day to recover.
that's right. So yeah, I
Oh,
think we could probably move into the main topic for today.
oh, yep.
I
So, what
mean,
is our main topic, Kyle?
so we're going to talk about our favorite game mechanics or mechanisms, however, whatever language you want to use there. And me and Shane here, we each did a list of the 3 we have that are our favorite at this current moment. Like anything with gaming, if you ask us 6 months from now, it might be completely different. But hey, this is where we're at right now. And I know, at least for myself, my list has been ones that have been pretty common for me that I think I've liked for several years. And like any other kind of podcast, I think I've listened to, there always seems to be some kind of honorable mention or something that didn't quite get the cut. So I'd like to start with that, if that's okay.
Okay, I don't have an honorable mention, but obviously you do. Let's go for it.
Yeah, so it wasn't really a mechanic in itself, but to me, I thought just the word immersion. So, like being sucked into the world that's present for you. By itself, immersion isn't a category or a mechanic, but I like, if I'm going to play a game or be in a world, I kind of want to feel like, what am I doing? What is my purpose? To feel more involved. It's probably why I don't like playing things on Tabletop Simulator, or if even someone's got like a little demo of something, right? That it's just, little white cardboard pieces. I like to see the art to be part of the world. So, and some of the notes I have here is, yes, there's the whole narrative part. So you can play Gloomhaven and you have the scenario and the dark music. Like, yeah, that's cool. That's immersion. But even you've played the game like Evolution and Oceans with me,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
again, it's a lighter style game, but I'm putting myself in that position where it's okay, you're a species, you're this fish, you're this like dinosaur thing, and you're fighting for survival. Like, and I think sometimes the art and even with Ocean's the little tiny fish, right? It just kind of makes you feel like, I'm eating some food. I'm not just grabbing this little plastic, I don't know, thing that says +1, like you're actually grabbing little tiny fishies and stuff, right? So I think
Yeah.
anything that can suck you in and make the world seem more real already, doesn't matter what the mechanic is after that, like I'm more into it.
Oh, I agree. Like, if I can't get into the theme of the game, like, yeah, to me, it's a dead game for me. Like,
Right.
a game that I've surprisingly had fun with is, oh, I'm trying to think the title. I know there's a couple kind of like it. I believe it's Pursuit of Happiness. It's kind of like a time management game, but you're taking on the role of you, and then you're trying to have a life. You're trying to date people. You're trying to have a career. And I got into it and I had fun. I even was like, I'm a bisexual rock star in this game. Not who I am in real life, but I'm
Right.
like, for the game, I was like, unfortunately at the time, the mate that best suited my goals was this other dude. So I'm like, yep, I had this girl. Now I'm having this dude. But I mean, I just got into the theme of it. I mean, it was fun. It was light. I mean, it's not super light, but it was a fun game. But yeah, if I didn't get into the theme, I would have thought, like, this is horrible. Like, I'm going to be controversial here, probably. There's a game, super expensive for what you get in it. I don't know why, but it's fast food magnate.
Okay, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Like, I think it's 100. Like, up here in our neck of the woods, is like $100+, I think, or very close to that for this box. And it is the most drab looking game I've ever looked at. I know, I guess there's some strategy there, but I could not get into the strategy of I'm a fast food store owner trying to create other stores and compete. I don't know, everything about it was so like clip arty or 50s advertising art that I just was like, I could not get into the theme of it. And surprisingly, the only time I played it, I won. But I think it was more because no one else knew what they were doing at the time, and I just happened to be in the right location near the end of the game. And that was just dumb luck because people just built poorly. If everybody had built away from me, I would never had a chance. But
Yeah, I heard that's a game where it's not like a close, usually someone wins by a landslide. And I
yeah,
follow Board Game Co. is one of the other, I guess, podcast YouTube channels I watch a lot. And it's funny because he just had that game in his top 10. I believe it made it into his top 5. And again, really focused on the gameplay and the strategic elements. And again, it all could come down to that group he's playing with. But kind of that same thing if it sounds like what you're kind of saying, right? Like you weren't bought into the immersionness of it, right? Like the little clip art didn't do it for you, right? So it's interesting. You could have a game that has magical, amazing mechanics, but if it isn't appealing to you visually, you're not going to have that same connection to it, right? And I think that's like the first time you put Everdale out for me to see. I'm like, I don't even know what this game does, but I'm intrigued. We got those squishy berries, right? So
you got that wooden tree standing there, yeah.
that's right. But again,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say some of that could be overkill. Like you don't necessarily need it. And I think there is kind of a diminishing return at some point, but you do need something like that to, I think, buy people in, right? Because what separates games from other games, right? Like you have your deck builders, you have your this, your that. Yeah, you have mechanics, but at the end of the day, you want that immersion. Like talk about like Pandemic Legacy and stuff, right? Which I've played with you twice and we suck. We are not doing well. The world is doing worse than COVID. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you feel like you're in that world, like there's this virus, and I know it's just like little colored cubes you're putting out, but the game does such a good job kind of building up the world and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, yeah. And one last thing on that fast food magnate is it might be just too heavy for me at that point, like because there is a lot of strategy. But I feel it's a kind of a game that you can't socialize with. You kind of you've got to be in your head in between your turns and plotting it out. Like there is a ton of strategy in it, and I could see like if you're a heavy, almost like Euros type player, and you want to just strategize, then I'm sure it's great for you. But I like to socialize and. Socializing and playing, I think it might be too heavy for me in that. So I mean, it's something I would probably give another try if somebody was going to play it.
Right.
But my first impression was like, for the amount of money you're paying for this,
sure,
it just wasn't worth it to me. It did not give me that return. Like what is Seventh Continent we picked up? That is a huge pricey game.
Yep.
But I mean, the story and the replayability that sucks you in, that's worth it to me. Like I kind of look at a board game almost like I do with video games. It's like, how many hours of play am I going to get for this? Is that my good value bang for my buck, right? Like if I'm going to play it once and it costs me $100, that's not very good bang for my buck, right?
Yeah, it's really nice when you can sit down. You're like, this is approximate like $1 per hour I've played of entertainment, and you're like, that's amazing. Like you don't get that return on a movie. Like you don't get that return on a beer, right? Like
yeah, that's true. And so that's kind of where I think that I kind of think I would have given it a better score or impression if it didn't have that high price tag. For some reason, that high price tag just. Combined with what it was, I'm just like, this ain't worth it.
Yeah, but and obviously, like you said, being north of the border makes it a little harder for some of those games. And you're right, like for what you're getting, I'm sure we'll get into the price of games with miniatures, right? Because I think that's probably why that Arena, the contest, is so pricey. But again, you're getting like a table full of miniatures, right? So you kind of,
Yeah,
where's that price tag being justified? But that's a whole nother topic in itself. We're here to talk about mechanics today.
that's it. That's right.
So
Let's not
let me.
rabbit trail.
That's right. We already spent like 10 minutes on the honorable mention. So, can I ask you what mechanic did you have written down first?
I have worker placement. It just seems to be something that draws me in. I love the choices it gives you, and usually there's potentially a strategy because it's like I have a priority of what I want to get done on this turn, and where do I put my guy? Like, do I prioritize going to this place first, hoping someone doesn't take the other place I need to go? Like, so I like there's kind of an agonizing strategy over where you put your guys. Some of the examples I had were Raiders of the North Sea, which is it's kind of a weird worker placement because you place a worker and then you take a worker.
Okay.
So you kind of want, and that one I find has more strategy because you can easily get blocked. Like if you're like, well, I'm going to go here and hire somebody and then I'm going to get some money. If somebody goes on the turn before you to hire somebody, you now can't go there. So if there's workers already on the hire spot and get money spot, you can only choose one of those choices on your turn because you have to place a worker first into an empty spot. So, I mean, it kind of gets that little take that in there where I hope this person doesn't go to where I want to go next turn. And they're probably hoping, I hope he goes there, but I hope he removes that so that I can go there next turn. So it's kind of an interesting. So it's kind of, yeah. And I don't know if you've ever played Raiders, but in the south side of the board, it's that you place a worker at some place, get the resources action, you remove a worker from another location, do that action. But then also the top half of the board, which is you go out raiding. So that's another option you have. You can go out and attack a settlement with your Vikings. And so you go and you put it there and you automatically win. It's just depending on how many victory points you get, depends on what you have. Like most of them will have prerequisites. Like you have to have so many men in your boat or so many rations or supplies to pay to go there. And then basically the contest is just to see how many points you get. You're always going to get that place. Once you go there, it's done. And that place will also give you a worker. So then you're still always placing a worker and getting a worker. So you always have one worker in your hand at the end of the turn. And the other kind of cool thing with Raiders is that it also has different colored workers. So certain spots do different things or are only accessed by certain colored workers. So sometimes you're going to go here to a place to raid it because you want the color worker it gives you. Or maybe you're going to go place a worker here to take a different worker off a different place because you need that for your next turn, that colored worker. Like I believe they're black, gray, and white. So I mean, that's my kind of example of that. Everdale was another one for worker placement where you're just choosing your spots, like what berries you want, and you hope somebody doesn't block you.
Right.
Like what resources you're going for. Champions of Midgard, another Viking theme one was my third example for this, which kind of give you a same kind of thing. It's where do you want to go attack people? Where do you want to go get resources? Like it just, I like the choices and strategies that it does. In Everdale, actually, yes, in Everdale, there is places that you can have more than one worker, and there are a few games that do that now, which is kind of cool. So that there are certain places where it's solo worker, you can block somebody, and then there's other places so you're not totally screwed. There's places where everyone can go and at least get something, right? So I don't know. That's kind of my thought on worker placement. I really enjoy the strategy it gives you and the interaction with the board.
And I think one thing I like about worker placement is you get to have a little bit about that player interaction, like that blocking, kind of that take that a little bit without having to get really aggressive and upset. Like, you're not taking a card out of somebody's hand, right? Like you're just blocking off something on the board. It's not. It kind of lets you get the person, but without having them feel personally attacked.
Yeah. Yeah, that's completely how it is. It's because definitely there's the personal attack of take that yeah, a lot of people don't like. They don't like feeling personally attacked.
Hmm. But having a
So
lumber yard blocked off is like, oh darn, but it's
yeah,
not like a knife in your back.
you may be like, oh, why'd you go there, Kyle? Like
Yeah,
I needed to go there, but it's not like you personally attacked me and singled me out.
yeah.
You just did what you were doing for your hand and play style. So yeah, so that's worker placement for me. What do you got on your list here?
So I guess the first one I'd like to talk about, and this might be something that's on your list too. We'll see. But one of the mechanics I put was drafting. So that draft mechanic. And if anyone's familiar, I got interested, or I guess my first experience with drafting was through Magic the Gathering. And drafting is that idea where there's a pile of cards or let's say resources or something in front of you. You get to take one, and then you pass it to a player to your left or right, and they take one, vice versa. What drafting kind of allows to have happened is you can almost kind of build or set your strategy kind of ahead of time based on the cards you're getting. And you have to find a really good balance between what do you want to do versus what do you kind of want to stop your other players from doing, right? Especially if it's a versus game. So you might get down to a choice where there's two really, really cool cards, but you have to pick one or the other, knowing that, okay, darn, now I got to pass this to Shane and he might take it. I might have to go against this later. And with that drafting mechanic, yes, Magic the Gathering has a whole format about it where you sit down. The draft itself might take an hour, and then you got to build your deck, play your cards. Like that's a whole other thing. But there's a lot of games that have implemented drafting just to shake things up at the beginning. So I think my example for that is like Near and Far. Again, I talked about a little earlier that we've been playing through that one with each other and our partners. And just at the beginning of that game, just the blueprints you get to start with for the things you can build, you draft. It's 5 cards, you're passing it around, but I find that's just enough to make each game feel a little bit fresh. Like I feel like it allows when you're drafting at the beginning of a game, it makes each game feel a little bit different. You get to have that pre-strategy. You kind of get to build a certain style. So I kind of like that. If all you ever did in a game was draft and there was kind of no game afterwards, it might be kind of boring by itself. But I like drafting as an implement to kind of improve on other mechanics. My one con about it is, I guess, long drafting versus quick drafting. So again, like I said with Magic, you don't want to be drafting for an hour and then you're like, darn it, that's half our game time and we haven't even started yet.
Yeah.
So I like the way that Near and Far does it, because you have that. It takes 3 minutes, 4 minutes just to start. And I've never played Terraforming Mars yet, but I heard that's another one that people love, and that's how they recommend with your kind of like starting cards is to draft it, right? Just something just to change up the little beginning of the game. And I think you could speak to drafting a little bit too, right? Because there's that, is it Blood Rage has quite a bit of drafting in it as well?
Yeah, actually, you're correct that drafting was on my list.
Well,
And
let's get you to pop into that then.
so it's kind of the same thing as you were saying. I love drafting because you can start with a strategy, but you might have to adjust it on the fly as you see what's coming by you. Like especially in Magic, like
Right.
you might have to adjust. But even in some of these games, like for my example, one was Blood Rage, like you said. At the beginning of each age, you do a draft, which will give you cards that you can use to upgrade your army, your gods. You can create monsters to come fight for you, or like I said, upgrade, or you can have stuff that will help you in battle. And so yeah, you get to every 3 times in the game you draft cards from these different ages, and it really helps you form your battle plan, what you want to do, how maybe how you're going to score points, like because you can do a whole thing if you get the right cards. You can do a whole thing where all you want your guys to do is die,
Right. Okay.
and then you're scoring points because you have. I can't remember right now. It's been so long since I played Blood Rage, but there is definitely like a god or something that you could put on your board that scores you points for however many people that age went to Valhalla. So,
Okay.
I mean, you can just start racking up points by just killing people instead of taking over stuff, or instead of, you want to be involved in every fight because you just want everybody to die because you don't
Right.
want to win. So, I mean, that's something. I also, you had mentioned that sometimes you didn't know if drafting would be just, if you just drafted, if that would be a good enough game. But I
Right.
got an example for that is that Sushi Go or Sushi Go Party. That's completely all the game is multiple rounds of drafting, and you're drafting cute sushi food,
Okay.
trying to do collect sets and stuff. And so you just, I think it's also a three round drafting game. But there is a strategy there because you have to, when you pick a card, you have to put it face up in front of you so everybody can see that, oh, you're going for this set of cards, which is going to give you lots of points. So you might find those cards start coming around less because other people are going to start picking them to kind of stop you on your strategy. So unlike Magic, where you can be drafting your strategy and no one knows what you're doing, Sushi Go, you're wide open for everybody to see what you're doing,
Right.
which makes it brings more strategy into it because now people can block you. They're not just thinking maybe you're on this; they know you're on that, and
Right.
they can start hate drafting you
Right.
to hurt your stuff. And the other one I was going to bring up was a game that also I love but never get to the table is Inish. It's kind of an area control game, but at the beginning of every turn, you draft. But it has a neat drafting mechanism, as in you take the one card, you pass. You pick up your one card and everything the other guy does. Now, out of that pack, you take two. So maybe you're changing your strategy. You're like, well, my first card is okay, but these other two cards are better. So now I'm taking these two and
Okay.
passing on. And so you're doing that each time. So it's like every time you draft, you have a full hand to look at, but an extra choice as well. And I think the last card gets, unlike most drafting games, I think the last card or two cards just get pitched away,
Okay.
just for some variety, especially on a smaller pool of cards.
Right.
So you don't know what people have, right? Because some stuff is going to be not in the game that round, so you're kind of guessing what they have, but you don't completely know. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting mechanic because normally drafting is take a card, pass, take a card, pass, but this is like you get your full hand to look at, and on round 2 you're picking 2, round 3 you're picking 3, and you can completely on the fly change your strategy for that turn. So that was kind of my thought drafting. I
Yeah.
mean,
No, that's a good point. And that sushi one you're talking about, like, I think that's cool because by the way you explained it, that set collection, right? Like, again, I still think you're kind of combining mechanisms there. Like, I think
I
drafting
guess.
is a way, and again, maybe this is me getting too finicky into it, but to me, drafting just improves kind of other strategies, right? Like, I don't know, like that same thing of set collection, but if you're just playing like goldfish out of a pile, I don't know, in the middle. Like I just think it's ways to make things kind of more exciting. And like you said, you can end up completely, especially the one you just mentioned there, where each round you're taking different or more cards. From what you started with to what you end with can be worlds upon differently, right? So
Yeah.
it kind of keeps you on your toes.
Oh, definitely. And like you said, I agree with the whole Sushi Go thing that I guess the game is set collecting, but drafting is the mechanism to collect.
Right.
So I could see it is the two mechanics. It isn't, I guess, straight drafting, but
Sorry, I wasn't trying to be the fun police or
no,
anything. But
no. It's you're right. It is set collection. That's the point of the game. Is you're trying to collect certain cards to be valuable. Like some cards are worth like nothing unless you have 3 of them or something, right? Like
right.
so. The game is set collection. Drafting is the mechanism they use to facilitate collecting those sets.
Right.
But yeah, and Magic also is another thing I love drafting. I mean, I just don't want this to always be a Magic podcast because there's a billion of those out there. And
Yes.
we're deeper than Magic. I mean, we may have started a Magic, but the whole world has been opened up to me in board games. Like, I mean, maybe once Magic's back to the table in real life, I might want to hit some tournaments and maybe get competitive again. But other than that, Magic's kind of taken a back seat where I like collecting it. I like playing Commander with you guys, but I'd rather be playing board games a lot of times now.
Well, and speaking of that comparison there, again, we're off on a rabbit hole, but I do like that idea of, you talked about the importance of playing a game and also getting to socialize, that social
Yeah.
connection as you're playing, and you don't want that game that's way too heavy that you can't socialize. That's kind of the way I'm starting to feel about Magic a little bit. These Commander games are great, but so much can be going on. You're trying to have a side conversation, and it's trying to find, when and what's appropriate kind of for what you're playing. Because, the last time we played Commander, there's someone's got a really exciting move they want to do, and they got to wait 5 minutes to do it because someone else was telling a story, right? So,
Yeah.
starting to try to just find that right balance, right? Where, maybe if we're playing a game at 10 o'clock at night, Commander's not the best place to go, right? Like there's something lighter we can play. And again,
Yeah.
mistakes and stuff too, right? So I do think you're right about that proper balance between, yes, we want to socialize, but we're also here to play the game. So maybe not pick a game that's, as heavy with, I don't even know, Magic probably has over 300 mechanics now. Like I don't know how many keywords and abilities there are. Like, why don't we play a game with 6 abilities, right? Like,
Yeah, no, and that's where, like, my example of that Regency game, it's like just smaller box games are perfect for that. They're kind of end of night.
yeah.
I mean, when I used to watch Tabletop, when that was the thing with Will Wheaton there, he had a board game day pretty much. He laid out once. And I think it was on his episode where he had some smaller box games. It was because he's showing, like, these are type of games we play in between games as almost like palate cleansers. Like we might play like a medium weight game, then we'll play one of these like Sushi Go or something small that just kind of like really social, just kind of unwind, and then you might go into like a heavier game.
Okay.
And so he might play, if he did a day, he might be like 3 heavier type games with like Arkham Horrors, the last game of the night. But he might play a couple of these small box, quicker, like half an hour games in between. And those I think are even good as good night games. Like at the end of the night, you feel like it's not time to go. You got time for something else and want to socialize.
But you don't want to
One
commit
of those,
3 hours.
yeah. You just throw one of those onto the table that's light, and people can just socialize, get out with the talking they want to get done. Like maybe stories haven't been finished that they wanted to tell, and still have a fun little game. I mean, otherwise you can just crack a beer and sit there and talk too. But
Right.
That's a more summertime thing.
Yeah, and it's trying to find time management, right? Where you're trying to fit all your hobbies in. You have the hobbies of, I want to be with my friends, and the hobbies that's like, hey, I want to play this game, and it's like trying to find that right balance. And that's even something, me and my wife were talking about. It's like, hey, if we're having a game night, maybe let's set the start time for half an hour early, and just have everyone come and chit chat a little bit, kind of get ready to go. So when we're good to game, yeah, we can still socialize, but we're not necessarily doing the same catch up, every 5 minutes as someone else comes in the door or something like that, right? And
no, that's for sure. So that's my one, and that's 2 of mine off your list, and you're one of yours. So give me your second one.
Right. So again, this kind of comes with that Magic background, and I hope it's not your last one, but that could happen. But deck construction is the next one for mine. And we talked. Okay, I'm safe. Good. So I can talk with this one knowing I'm not stealing your last one. So for deck construction, some of the games that really come to mind with this one, yes, there's the start of Magic with having to build your deck. Yes, but we're past Magic. We've talked about that. For me, it was really, I guess, the superhero games that really got me kind of into this category. With deck construction, you have the DC deck building game as well as kind of Marvel's Legendary that you do. And both games kind of require you where you get a hero, you get an ability where you might have something unique about you that sets you apart from other players, right? So that's how you kind of have like some kind of a start. But then you have this hand of cards where everyone might start off with something similar, right? You might get a couple recruit cards, you might get a couple kicks or punch, your basic everyday cards that don't really do much for you, but they get you started, right? And then depending on what's available or what expansions you're playing with, every turn you're kind of finding the balancing between, defeating your end goal, whether it's other players or whether it's, the big boss you're fighting, or adding new, more powerful cards to your deck. So it's a good balance between, do we want to be better for the future, or try to do something right now? And part of the reasons why I like deck construction is each game can feel so different. Like you can be playing that exact same game, that legendary, but one night you got a bunch of Spider-Mans and they all really, let you draw a bunch of cards and you're like, Spider-Man, 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 this, right? And then this other night you might be playing and you're Thor and you're just like, I can just throw down massive damage, right? So you kind of have this, each like hero can kind of play their ways. And it's like, okay, do I want Spider-Man and Thor in my deck, and can these work well together, right? So,
Yeah.
so that's another way the deck construction works. Each game, again, even though you're playing the same game, depending on what your goal is, what your objective is, again, the DC one I know I've played more of a versus kind of thing. The legendary one's more kind of cooperative. Depending on what you're going for, right? You're building up the different powers. And sometimes you might lock into, I have my favorite hero, but then tonight, we're just going to randomly give one out of the pile. And then you have to be flexible and try to get kind of a new strategy kind of as you go along. And even that, when we were talking about favorite games there on our last episode, I talked about Aeon's End. And that's another one too, where you're building your deck, you're getting your spells, kind of as we go along. And even when you mentioned about the Tableau building there at the beginning of today's episode, one of the things that I said sounds like really cool about it was the fact that you're kind of building up to like, okay, I can use this epic thing now, right? Because you've got the right things in place. It's the same thing for these deck builders, right? You're kind of building your own hero or your own tower or abilities. You get to see the end result. And I think that's kind of what I really what I wrote down here was you get to see the growth from the starting project to the finished project, right? So again, with legendary, you started off just being able to do a couple little punches or even some cards that missed, to being able to just throw down like legendary laser eyes, like magical boomerangs or something, right? Like you just get these awesome abilities.
Yeah, and the whole deck building thing, I mean, Dominion, I believe, was one of the first that really brought it out. But people have really kind of revolutionized that, because Dominion, I mean, it's the OG, it's good, but like Legendary especially brought in some complexity in how do I want to word this, like card. I used to have the phrase and I can't think of it now, but the order in which you play your cards becomes important.
Right.
Like even with the DC one, it's a little bit more simple, where you could just slap down your whole hand and be like, oh, this is how much I have to spend, right?
Right.
Where the legendary one is like, okay, I'm gonna play Spider-Man because he has this symbol, which then when I play the Hulk, activates the Hulk special ability because I played this Spider-Man. But if I played the Hulk first, I would lose that special ability because I didn't have a card on the battlefield with that icon that required for Hulk special ability. So it really, sequencing, that's what it is. Card sequencing becomes a real legendary. Really brought that in, which brought a more strategy and depth, even onto how you build your deck, right?
Yes.
Like if you're looking at the symbols you have, you're like, and you see what's available, you're like, well, this triggers this card and this whatever. Like you're not just looking at straight stats now. You're kind of looking at, oh, what little tweaks can I do and combos can I build with these cards if I can get them in my hand. So
yeah, I played those games where you get to about like the halfway point, and I found myself not even doing things on my turn because I'm like, well, anything I can recruit right now doesn't do anything with what I want, right? So it almost seems like it's interesting to me when you have a game where you're choosing not to do something because the action of not acting is better than taking something that, would go against what you're working on.
Yeah, it's just the whole filling your deck. I mean, most decks builders, I only played Legendary a few times because it was co-op, and at the time, my partner wasn't as thrilled with it. She really liked the DC, the simplicity of the DC one. I think she could probably get into Legendary now, but unfortunately that's been moved on from my collection.
Right.
But I totally lost my train of thought there.
It's okay. I was going to say with deck construction, with each one of my, I guess, topics here, I did put a con. And my con for deck construction is just the length it can take sometimes. So one of the things, like, Legendary is such a fun game, but the boss you fight, or the henchmen, or the villains, whatever you want to call it, they're their own deck that you got to build, right? So
Yeah.
the building up the scenario, it just kind of adds to that setup time, where that game is so fun and I love playing it, but I'm like, do I want to spend 15 minutes building the villain deck? So it does. It's one of those ones that's a lot of fun, but just the setup time can be a little bit longer, especially if the deck construction, if we're comparing it back to Magic, right? You've done your draft. Now you got to let everyone build their deck before you start. So obviously, certain games have handled that in a more speedy process than others.
Yeah.
Like in Aeon's End, it's really cool because your deck empties. You don't even shuffle it. You don't even take the time to do that. You just flip it over and start taking from the top. So there's certain games have found ways to kind of speed up that process as well.
And in the comparison of DC and Legendary, like Marvel's Legendary, that is definitely a huge plus for DC.
Yes.
Like, you can play that game, quickly unsort the cards that you've added into your deck, and play it again. Where Legendary, if I remember correctly, like, you even have to build your heroes deck. Like, you're going to build the scenario deck, then you're going to pick which heroes go in there.
Shuffle that all together.
Whether through a random generator or set things in the instructions, you're picking them, and then you got to put in like a hostage deck or civilian deck. Like, there's definitely a lot more to set that game up. And I think that's one thing my wife really liked about DC too, is it was quick. Like,
you're just good to play.
You can be shuffled up and playing again in 5 minutes. Like,
and it's funny because you think when someone says we're going to play with a bunch of cards, you're thinking it's not going to take 15, 20 minutes of setup. Like, we have Gloomhaven, we've played that a few times. We know we're in for a lot of setup. Like, we now have, it's a team effort. Everybody's grabbing stuff we can, and that still takes forever, right? You don't expect when someone says, hey, let's play a deck builder, that you're going to get that long period. And I guess you could just say, well, we'll just set it up for next time, right? But then is that going to sit for a week, 2 weeks, 3 months?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say that the OG Dominion also has a very quick setup. Like, they have an app for random generator, or they have a deck they can shuffle up to randomly generate what you're going to play. And then you're just picking those cards and putting them in a Tableau for you to buy from. Like, you're not shuffling another deck. Like, it's just they're all available at the beginning of the game.
Okay.
So that makes it a little quicker too. But yeah. So yeah, that's definitely deck building.
Yep, we have one more each, and I know we're running long on this one. Keep chatting, but yeah, let's get into our last mechanic.
Okay, so my last mechanic is multi-use cards. I'm really enjoying that in games right now. So there's never really a dead card in your hand. Like, that's a problem with a lot of games, is that sometimes you're planning something and somebody does something, and now you've got cards in your hand that don't do anything for you.
Okay.
So I'm really liking multi-use cards. Like, an example, I put like 3 examples for each, but so a game I have called Path of Light and Shadow. Each card in your hand can either be used as an aggressor, like an attack, or it can be used to build on a tech tree. Like, so there's different technologies you can get that increase abilities you have, or they can also be used to promote a card. You can get rid of, like, cull one of those crappy cards at the beginning, the starter card, and get a more powerful version. So you can use those cards to pay that cost, or you can use a card to just get rid of other cards. Like, you can use the military value of a card to get rid of that much military value of other cards out of your deck, to thin your deck to make it.
Oh, that's cool.
So they've got multi-use. There's always something you can do with these cards in your hand. It's never like, well, I was going to attack, but now you did that, and now I don't have enough attack power. Well, they're not dead now. Now I can just straight up use them to build something. Maybe the attacking ones are less powerful to build, but you still can do something with them. Like when we talk about legendary, like your attacking cards, that's all they do. They don't give you money to spend to buy stuff. So I like where they combine, where your cards are never dead in your hand. Another one that does it in a different way is Gloomhaven that we talk about a bunch. Like the cards you pick dictate where you play in the game in turn order. They also have multiple uses. Like you may have a plan of like, I'm going to do this and this, but then you get there and you're like, oh, I can't do that. But now I have 4 options on each card of what to do. Like you got 4 specific things, and then you got 2 basics and 2 specifics on each card. So you've got multiple choices to make. So the card, I mean, sometimes in Gloomhaven, I find it's kind of a dead card. Like I'm like, because you can't move them twice usually, which might be the only thing you want to do. But for the most part, you're always alive with it. No matter what somebody does, you still have something you can do with your cards because they're not so narrow, because they're multi-use. And the other one I had was it was mainly in the North Sea saga from Shem Phillips, like his Shipwrights of the North Sea. For a minor thing, like the deck that you drew from, the top of the card was the market. So the more you drew cards, every time you drew a card from that deck, it changed the market price for resources. So it's kind of a cool thing where, so I guess you wouldn't sleeve that deck, at least if it wasn't clear, because you needed to see the back of the deck. But then he took it into Raiders of the North Sea, which is the second of that trilogy, where cards in your hand, you can go to the village and play them from your hand as some kind of action, or you can go to also in the village to this hiring spot and take that card and put it into your boat, which then gives you a different action. Like, so the cards, they're never really dead. Like if you're at the point where you're like, so you have your boat filled because you can only have so many people in your boat, all the cards in your hand still aren't useless because you can always go somewhere else and use them to do something. Like it was just something I have really been liking lately. There's just the multi-use ability of cards, which I thought when you talked Magic at first, you're like, I hope I don't steal your last one. I was like, yeah, Magic has a lot of multi-use cards now.
Now, yes. But so that's almost like the evolution of gaming, right? Where I think they've really learned that nobody just wants to take a turn off and do nothing, right? So finding, and whether it's like discard the card to get an extra movement, or it can be as simple or as complex as some of the, other options you were sharing there, right? But just knowing that no matter what, there's something you can do. I think that it's going to allow people to feel more connected with the game, right? Because like you said, oh, someone just did that, so I can't. But you can still have something to do, right? I think that's so key.
Yeah, and I think that's just like you said, the evolution of gaming. Like if you look at some of, let's go Dominion for the deck building. Like there can be times in that game where, your hand is horrible. And you've got one thing you can do, and if the person before you does it, you have a dead hand. Like you're basically going to play your hand out for nothing and take the turn off. I mean, that's what I find that they're trying to evolve it so that you don't get as many of those dead turns. I mean, it's not impossible still to get a dead turn, but they've made it a lot harder where there really is always something you can do that advances the game.
Right. Yes.
Which I think is great because, I mean, if we go back to the old days of Monopoly and stuff, there's a lot of times where you just hated your life on your turn.
Yeah, you just roll dice, you roll your eyes, and you move along, right? So
yeah,
it's like, it's good. It's trying to get people more included, more invested, part of the world.
And then turning their brain on more.
Yes.
Because you got to think about what you're doing instead of, like you said, roll a dice, move your thing, react to whatever happens. Mm-hmm. You actually have like, well, I can do this with my cards. I can use this card to manipulate that dice to not take me that place. Like
the only con I could see about the multi-use cards is if it gives way too much choice and all of a sudden people are taking 20-minute turns.
Yes, analysis paralysis is a thing, and that's another topic.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess that leads
So,
me to
yeah,
my
what's your
last one,
last one?
hey? So
Yeah.
I don't know if this is official to what you'd call it in the fan of board gaming. So I'll explain it here in a second. But my number one that I put was grid-based tactics. So
Okay.
when I was growing up, some of my favorite video games, it wasn't like the Mario platformer, it wasn't like the Kirby All Stars or anything. I like kind of the heavy stuff, like Final Fantasy Tactics, the Front Mission series, Vanguard Bandits, and in all these games, you essentially have your map, which is on a grid. You're moving your characters around, and you're attacking other people, whether it's with magic attacks, machine guns, whatever the theme might be. But you get this map where the terrain is different, so you get a bonus to your dodge while you're in trees, or your movement is slowed when you're in water. The world itself kind of changes the way you strategize. And I kind of wrote down that it's almost like a more exciting chess, because in chess, yes, you have this grid that you have these units that can only move in certain directions, and you're trying to defeat the other players. But that's all there is to it. So if you take chess and you were to fancy it up with like lasers and magic and trees, and now your units can move faster or slower depending on where they are. I think it makes a beautiful strategy game. One of the things we talked about, and you see this in Gloomhaven too, is like behavior prediction. Like, do you have a good idea of what the enemies are going to do? Can you spring an ambush for them that's coming? And I know when we're playing Gloomhaven, sometimes we think we're in the best setup, and then all of a sudden their card flips over on the enemies, and you're like, oh no, like everything we've kind of built around, and all of a sudden it gets changed. So
Yeah.
I really like that development and that strategy that comes with, here's this giant map, and we have to move around. Every piece is unique in their design and their abilities, and it kind of creates this puzzle where you have to defeat the other team, and sometimes you have some more luck based stuff, where you're rolling dice. I was sitting there and I'm like, well, would I consider this like Risk? Because Risk, you're kind of moving around pieces around a board and attacking, but I feel like it's not the same, because you don't, you know I want to be very distinctive that I don't just mean like an area control game, because a lot of those are on grids as well. But I think it's just more of that, more, I guess, that tactical kind of skirmish style, I think is what I really enjoy. And yes, Gloomhaven is a perfect example of it, but there's some other games too, like the Arena the Contest I was talking about earlier. Like, that is done on a grid, and again, you can play versus, or you can do this campaign with puzzles and stuff. So I think there could just be a lot of depth and different things that can come with grid-based tactics.
Oh, there definitely is. I mean that's what like Stuffed Fables is.
Mhm.
Mice and Mystics, very similar thing. And I get what you're saying where like Risk isn't, because Risk is you're just moving into that area and you're just conflict. Where
Yeah.
what you're talking is I'm gonna have conflict, but I want to position myself where I can do the most damage and then avoid as much damage. Like maybe I
Yes.
move in and attack, and then if I have another movement, like I think we're starting to see cards in that now where you can move, attack, move.
Yes.
So you kind of like can get yourself in, do your damage, and get yourself out. Where Risk is just you're moving in and then you just headbutt each other until someone's out. Like
Yeah. There's no archers really, or bombardments, and
yeah,
that kind of. Again, my big con for that one, although it's my number one favorite, lots of times those games, teaching them can be quite the barrier. They're not usually the easiest game to pick up and be like, hey, so here's these 30 different things about the map you have to know. As you also need to know your character's abilities. If I was more patient, I guess it sounds like I might be a Warhammer guy, but I just that's a little
I
little
was about
much
to
for me.
say. I'm like you're gatewaying to Warhammer right now with that
Oh.
stuff. Yeah.
But yeah, I think for me, you have that Gloomhaven Arena the Contest. I think will be that perfect mix, and Arena the Contest seems a bit more simplified. Like, you have four special abilities, and then you have your 1 attack value, and then you're always taking that and rolling a d20 versus a defense value. So you're not, there's depth to it where you can try to outline and piece together everything, or you can go, this thing looks cool, let's roll the dice and see what happens, right? So you kind of have that one. To me, seems like it should be easier to kind of teach. Where Gloomhaven, we've talked about, it's like, oh, we could get someone else to join us, and it's like, God, no, I don't want to teach someone again. Because then if you lose, I don't know, there's that setback. And my last con for that one too is it can be extremely hard to get to the table, because those games often take several hours and require a lot of table space. But again, my number one absolute love game, and that comes from, I think Final Fantasy Tactics was the first video game that I put 100 hours into. I don't know how many playthroughs.
Well, I actually, listening to you, there was a game, it brought back a game that I almost got into back when I started, which I don't know what the setup's like, but I think it has a smaller footprint on the table. Is this Crossmaster Arena? I don't know if you've ever seen those, but they come with, like, I don't know if I'll see if you can see this. I just completely lost whatever I was looking at, but oh well. I was going to show you, but they came with pre-painted minis, but it was the same kind of thing where, like, you would put your team on the map, and there actually would be, you would put trees and crates and stuff, and then you'd have a battle, and they all had their own special abilities, and you'd move them grid-based around. And it really was a beautiful looking game. I don't know how in depth it was. I mean, it seemed to be really hot for a while, and I haven't heard a lot about it lately, but it might still be a thing. But it was one of those games that I looked at and I'm like, oh, beautiful painted minis that I don't have to paint, because I really wasn't into painting at that time.
Right.
Because usually all the other combat type games like that, you had to paint it. Or assemble and paint, like.
Yes, yeah, the assembling, that's something I do not want to get into. Painting is enough work.
Yeah, but yeah. So those are our 3 mechanics that are top for us at this time. You can always let us know what you think and join the discussion. You got anything else you think you want to add today, Kyle?
No, just happy gaming.
Okay, man. So you can find us on Instagram and Twitter. Windy City Meeples is what it is on both of those. You can search for us on the usual podcast hotspots, and you can email us at windycitymeeples@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed this episode and hope to talk to you guys soon. Bye from Shane.
Take care from Kyle.
Good night.